Good afternoon. We're Group 12 and we're going to be presenting on cancer in the environment, chemicals, and fine particles in the air. I'm Andrea.
I'm Chris.
I'm Sarai.
And I'm Rihanna.
Let's begin. What are airborne carcinogens? Airborne carcinogens are substances that cause cancer that we inhale. They consist of both physical and chemical particles. Particulate matter smaller than 2.5 micrometers or PM 2.5 is especially dangerous because it can enter the bloodstream and penetrate deep in the lungs. Common exposures in daily life include industrial smoke, tobacco smoke, and vehicle emissions, which contain chemicals like benzene and formaldehyde. Global burden of air pollution on cancer. One of the main environmental causes of cancer in the world is air pollution. The WHO, or World Health Organization, estimates that air pollution is responsible for around 10% of lung cancer deaths worldwide. In 2013, the WHO's IARC formally designated outdoor air pollution as a carcinogen, placing it in the same category as smoking and asbestos. Because of this, the problem of worldwide health importance, particularly in low and middle income nations with laxer air quality laws. The behavior of these agents varies. For instance, PM 2.5 results in chronic inflammation, whereas benzene interferes with the replication of cell DNA. Major types of airborne carcinogens. These chemicals are frequently carried into deep lung tissue by particulate matter, which exacerbates the damage. Airborne dust in areas near industrial or mining operations contain metals like arsenic and calcium. Where do these carcinogens come from? Indoor air quality is also a major source of pollution, despite the common misconception that it only occurs outdoors. The risk of cancer in the home can be considerably increased by cigarette smoke and inadequate ventilation. The main sources of airborne carcinogens in metropolitan areas are manufacturing emissions and vehicle exhaust. Burning wood or biomass indoors can have the same impact in rural or undeveloped regions. Now I'm going to be passing it off to Chris.
Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be talking about molecular mechanisms and environmental factors that can cause them to lead towards cancer. Molecular mechanisms are cellular processes carried out by biochemical interactions and pathways. Molecular mechanisms include cellular activities such as cell repair, signal response, homeostasis, and a regulation of genes. Next slide. First, we are going to talk about fine air particles, starting off with air pollution. Air pollution is one of the most widespread environmental risks today. Chemicals like PM 2.5, NO2, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons can damage cells through processes like oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, and DNA damage. In 2024, a study was conducted called Science of Total Environment. It showed that long-term exposure towards PM 2.5 increases the risk of breast cancer and gliomas. At the molecular level, ROS is generated. These are unstable oxygen-containing molecules. ROS molecules damage DNA, lipids, and protein. This is the perfect recipe for cancer. On top of that, ROS activates transcription factors, including NFKB. NFKB promotes inflammation and tumor survival. The other type of fine air particles can cause damage to the ozone. Fine air particles such as chlorine over time can thin the ozone, causing increased levels of UV radiation. This shows that fine air particles can affect you in many ways. The most dangerous types of UV radiation are UVB and UVA, due to them directly causing DNA mutations. UV radiation is especially dangerous because it causes the formation of thymine dimers, which occurs when two DNA bases bond and bond incorrectly and cause a mutation. It also mutates P53. P53 is a tumor suppressor gene, and when it's mutated, it stops operating correctly. This allows damaged cells to survive and divide rapidly. The most dangerous yet common types of cancers from UV radiation are basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and melanoma. Next slide. Moving over to chemical particles, we are going to start off with tobacco smoke. Tobacco smoke contains more than 60 known carcinogens, including arsenic, benzoapyrene, and formaldehyde. When looking at the molecular level, benzoapyrene binds to DNA and causes mispairing during the replication stage, which can lead to mutations in multiple genes, including the P53 gene and the KRAS gene. On top of that, chronic smoking also promotes inflammation, oxidative stress, and angiogenesis. It is estimated that 90% of lung cancers cases in men and 80% in women are due to smoking-related exposure. Another type of chemical particles that are carcinogenic are heavy metals. I know what you're thinking. Heavy metals are not inhaled. However, heavy metals like arsenic, cadmium, and chromium are found in pesticides, vehicular exhaust, and industrial emissions. Inhalation of these fumes can bring heavy metals into your lungs. Heavy metals cause epigenetic changes, which alter the gene expression without mutating the DNA strands. One example of this DNA hypermethylation, a silencing of tumor suppressor genes. This is caused by arsenic. Another example is cadmium. Cadmium interferes with histone modifications. This changes how tightly DNA is packed and read by the cell. Heavy metals also induce oxidative stress, which lead to mitochondrial dysfunction and even further genetic instability. On top of that, the effects of heavy metals can be passed on to future generations through epigenetic memory. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Rihanna.
Hi, I'm going to be presenting the factors that are going to be altering molecular mechanisms. So as we've seen, the link between air pollution and cancer does not occur through a single pathway or mechanism. What happens is similar to something of a chain reaction. It starts with the cellular level and ends in uncontrolled cell growth and immune evasion. Each of these processes can act alone or together to increase cancer risk. The slide shows four major molecular mechanisms that are triggered by carcinogenic air pollutants. Starting with oxidative stress, air pollutants can generate reactive oxygen species, or ROS, which cause DNA damage. This includes strand breaks and mutations in important genes like the p53 gene, which is a major tumor suppressor. If this damage is left unchanged, it can lead to mutations that promote cancer development. A study by Risom et al. In 2005 observed these effects and it demonstrated a correlation between the particulate matter and increased oxidative stress. Next, epigenetic modification can occur due to exposure to air pollutants. How epigenetics works is that the DNA sequence itself is not altered. The way it's expressed is what changes. A recent study from Gavito Covarrubias et al. From 2024 reviewed the impact of particulate matter and its exposure on genetic pathways. These pathways being DNA methylation, histone acetylation, and non-coding RNAs. What these changes can lead to are silencing of tumor suppressor genes or activating oncogenes. Next, let's talk about how air pollutants cause chronic inflammation. Inflammation is a normal immune response in the body, but if it becomes chronic, this helps create a more tumor-friendly environment. Thompson et al., a 2015 study, described how pollutants can activate cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha, which increase uncontrolled cell growth and reduce immune surveillance. This study focuses on how immune disruption from environmental exposures raises cancer risk. Lastly, air pollutants can affect cell proliferation and apoptosis dysfunction. Signals that support uncontrolled cell growth and suppress apoptosis or programmed cell death are activated by the particulate matter from air pollution. These damaged cells continue dividing when they should be eliminated instead. This mechanism is explained in Agay, Zark et al., which outlines how particulate matter exposure modifies proliferation and apoptosis in several organs. Ultimately, as it was seen in these 4 key mechanisms, they show how air pollution becomes a biological threat that can promote cancer development at multiple levels. So, next slide, please. Now that we've talked about those metabolic mechanisms, let's look at the epidemiological evidence and how it affects real populations. So as you can see on the left, according to the World Health Organization, excuse me, or the WHO, air pollution contributes to about 7 million premature deaths globally each year. Out of these deaths, about 29% of them are lung cancer deaths and then are directly linked to air pollution itself. Additionally, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, or the IARC, reported that for every 10 micrograms per cubic meter increased in particulate matter, the lung cancer risk goes up by about 8%. In comparison to how small of a change this is in exposure, the increase in lung cancer is huge. Sorry. These statistics on the left are important because they show us the scale of the problem. But the bar graph on the right helps us see the pattern that cities with higher air pollution consistently report higher lung cancer rates, which reflects real populations. Starting with Stockholm on the left, it has a low particulate matter level of just 6 micrograms per cubic meter, and we see it as correspondingly low in terms of lung cancer rate for about only 24 per 100,000 people. Next, in Los Angeles, where pollution is moderate at 12 micrograms per cubic meter, lung cancer incidence rises slightly to around 34 per 100,000 people. Moving on to Beijing, which is with a particulate matter of concentration of 42 micrograms per cubic meter, we see lung cancer rates increase more significantly, reaching around 58 per 100,000. Delhi shows the highest exposure at 90 micrograms per cubic meter, and this is not And not surprisingly, it also has the highest lung cancer rate in the group, with about 64 per 100,000 people. Lastly, in Cairo, they have a particulate matter level of 76 micrograms per cubic meter, with a cancer incidence of approximately 51 per 100,000 people. This pattern across cities shows a clear and consistent correlation, being that as particulate matter levels go up, so does lung cancer risk. This reinforces what we've seen in large-scale studies like Hamra et al., conducted in 2014, and the World Health Organization's global health data. The particulate matter values in the chart come from the IQ-AIR's 2023 World Air Quality Report, and the cancer incidence data is based on GlobalCan 2020's estimates. Some other supporting statistics shown at the bottom of the slide are that air pollution is now considered the world's largest environmental health risk, according to the World Health Organization. Additionally, urban residents have 20 to 40% higher cancer risk from traffic-related pollutants, as shown in the ESCAPE project, which was part of a larger European cohort study. And finally, 10 to 15% of lung cancers in industrial workers are linked to occupational air pollutant exposure, according to the Center for Disease Control and the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. It is also important to note that air pollution exposure isn't equal. Low-income communities and people of color are more likely to live near highways, factories, and industrial zones. This means that often they may face disproportionately higher risk to these air pollutants. Ultimately, all of this epidemiological statistics and data shows us that there's a clear and urgent link between air pollution and cancer, making this a public health priority. So now I'm gonna give it to Sarah.
So let's begin by exploring current research linking air pollution and cancer. Over the past decade, scientists have become increasingly concerned about the health effects of a fine particulate matter, also known as PM2.5. These microscopic particles are small enough to enter the lungs and the bloodstream, which makes them hazardous. Starting with breast cancer, a study found that individuals living in areas with higher PM2.5 exposure experience an 8% increase in breast cancer incidence. This might sound modest, but considering the global prevalence of air pollution, even a small percentage translates to thousands of additional cases. This adds to the growing body of evidence that links environmental exposures to hormone-related cancers. Pancreatic cancer, a disease often diagnosed late and with a low survival rate, has also shown a link to PM2.5. A study revealed that individuals exposed to higher annual concentrations had a 20% higher chance of developing pancreatic cancer. This is significant because it suggests that air pollution may play a role in the development of this particularly deadly form of cancer, possibly through chronic inflammation or interference with pancreatic function. We also see evidence of harm in the urinary system. A comprehensive meta-analysis examined the relationship between PM2.5 exposure and urological cancer. The data revealed that for every 5 nanogram per cubic meter increase in PM2.5 exposure, there was a 6% increased risk of developing cancers such as bladder and kidney cancer. This suggests that inhaled particles may be processed through the kidneys as well as the urinary tract, which damages the tissue over time. In head and neck cancers, researchers found similar patterns, which is higher PM2.5 exposure correlated with greater cancer risk. What's more damaging is marginalized and low-income communities were disproportionately affected, which highlights a clear environmental justice issue. People living near industrial zones or highways often face the greatest exposure, compounding existing health disparities. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Lung cancer is one of the most well-documented illnesses associated with air pollution. A landmark study titled Long-Term Exposure to Fine Particulate Matter and Incidence of Cancer found that for every 10 grams per cubic meter increase in PM 2.5, there was a staggering 36% increase in the risk of developing lung adenocarcinoma, which is a common type of lung cancer. This is particularly alarming because PM 2.5 is absolutely everywhere, from vehicle exhaust to industrial emissions and even indoor sources like cooking and heating. PM 2.5 particles can penetrate deep into the lungs, bypassing the body's natural defenses and settle in the alveoli. Once there, they generate reactive oxygen species that can damage DNA, promote chronic inflammation, and trigger mutations that eventually may lead to cancer. Now turning to leukemia, particularly in occupational settings. A large cohort study conducted in China looked at workers exposed to benzene, a volatile organic compound used in industries like chemical manufacturing, rubber, and oil refining. Benzene is metabolized in the body into compounds that interfere with hematopoietic stem cells, leading to chromosomal aberrations and suppression of bone marrow function. As a result of these findings, the World Health Organization now classifies benzene as a Group 1 carcinogen, which means there's strong evidence of its cancer-causing potential in humans. What makes this even more concerning is that workers are often unaware of these exposure levels, and protective regulations can vary widely between countries. Next slide, please. With all of this evidence, how can government and health agencies respond? In 2021, the World Health Organization released updated air quality guidelines. They lowered the safety limit for PM2.5 exposure to just 5 nanograms per cubic meter, based on emerging research that showed health effects even at lower levels. These guidelines are meant to help countries and cities worldwide develop more stringent pollution controls. In the US, the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, plays a central role in regulating pollutants. The EPA enforces limits on PM 2.5, benzene, and other harmful chemicals like formaldehyde. Thanks to these efforts, there has been a 6% decline in benzene emissions in the US since the year 2000. Improved urban air quality has also been linked to lower cancer mortality rates. Cities that invested in cleaner public transport, green infrastructure, and industrial emission controls have seen measurable improvements in population health. But challenges still remain. Industrial lobbying continues to influence environmental policy, delaying or weakening necessary regulations. Developing countries where industrial growth often outpaces environmental oversight face particularly steep hurdles. Many of these regions lack the resources or political will to monitor or control these emissions effectively. Next slide, please. And to summarize, environmental pollutants such as PM 2.5 and benzene are well-established carcinogens. They have been linked to a wide variety of cancers, including lung, breast, pancreatic, blood cancer, and urological cancer. What's important to understand is that both short-term and long-term exposure can increase cancer risk, even at levels previously thought to be safe. This challenges the adequacy of current regulatory standards in many parts of the world. Recent studies have also shed light on how these pollutants work at a molecular level. They promote oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, and DNA damage. In some cases, they even disrupt gene expression or lead to epigenetic changes that can predispose individuals to cancer. Certain populations face higher risks. These include non-smokers, low-income communities living near factories or highways, and occupational workers exposed to chemicals. Environmental justice must be a priority moving forward to ensure that everyone, not just the wealthy, can breathe clean air. The good news is that regulation does make a difference. Cities and countries that adopt strict air quality policies have seen measurable improvements. For example, after banning leaded gasoline or reducing industrial emissions, cancer rates have dropped in some populations. Finally, continued research is essential. As we uncover new links, like those between PM 2.5 and pancreatic or head and neck cancers, we need to refine exposure thresholds, create effective policies, and invest in public health education to reduce risk for future generations. That's it.
Here are the references that were used in slides 2 to 5 that talked about what are airborne carcinogens, its global impact, and the major carcinogens and where they come from.
These are the references used in slides 6 to 8, and we use these to talk about molecular mechanisms, fine air particles, and chemical particles.
These are the references that I used for discussing the factors that affect molecular mechanisms and the statistics and data presented.
And these are the sources that I used to document the cancer research studies and the effects of pollution.
Lastly, we're group 12. I'm Andrea.
I'm Chris.
I'm Sarai.
And I'm Rihanna.
We thank you all for listening to our presentation.
Thank you.